This is author Andrew Gillsmith. He is the writer of this book right here. I'm going to hold it up. Hopefully you can see it. That's it. Just so you know, it's the actual author. There's a picture of him. He's right there, Our Lady of the Artilects. I will be doing a second interview with Andrew Gillsmith. I believe we did one last week, which you can see on this channel. And I will be having him back into the labyrinth to discuss Our Lady of the Artilects, because oh boy, what a fun read this is. And you will find a link to his Amazon authors page in the show notes below.
Thank you.
So Andrew, thank you for coming on. Andrew, can you please tell us what is hashtag SPFBO? SPFBO. I hope I'm getting that right.
It sounds good to me. It's SPFBO, self-published fantasy blog off. And it's a contest that's been around, I think, for 3 years now. And it's great. It's done wonderful things for the indie author community. And the people who've organized it are, generous with their time. They're well-intentioned. They take the process, as far as I can tell, very seriously. Now, I will say this. I don't write fantasy. I write science fiction. So I've never been in it. I haven't followed it that closely. I've started following it more this year than in past years, just because I know some people who are in it now. But it's a contest, and it's about giving indie authors exposure and celebrating great indie books, right? And helping them find an audience. So that's what it is. There's a comparable contest in science fiction that's run by Hugh Howey. And for those who don't know, Hugh is the author of Wool, which was a breakout bestseller, self-published novel from about 6 or 7 years ago. He now has an Apple TV show on it. Hugh's, like, I've interacted with Hugh. I don't know him personally, but I've interacted with him. Seems like a great guy. And again, just trying to help.
Well, it sounds really, really cool. And, I love these events that are organized by the indie authors, and they're coming together. It's a wonderful, this opportunity for networking, for learning about each other. And there are some really, really nice names out there, some authors, who I've actually had on my show before, who are at least tangentially involved in this. And, I have not run across a name associated with SPFBO who I did not respect or who I wasn't aware of in some way. So what I would like to do for the listeners and watchers here is kind of frame what me and Andrew are about to discuss. The short and sweet of it is that it seems like there was an accusation that was cast out at the winner of the SPFBO. Now, this person was not the declared winner of the contest. I think they were rated as the runner up or first place. I'm not quite sure, the actual mechanics of it. But the author's name is M.V. Prindle. And just, his book looks cool. Okay. He authored a book called Bob the Wizard.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seems like a pretty cool book. Yeah. I mean, it has enticed me enough to make
me
want to go out and buy it and just kind of see what it's all about. Yeah. I mean, because as the controversy, which maybe this is all what it was about. I'm joking. I'm joking. MV seems like a decent person. But the book itself, how people were providing a synopsis of it as I'm following along the Twitter threads, it seems really, really cool. And I'm upset that the controversy has kind of stuck to his book, which I think this is something that he can weather. But some questions were raised about the cover art for his book, and his book was entered into SPFBO. And what I quickly found out about science fiction writers is that most of them seem to have a background in either IT or the sciences. I mean, there's some really, really, really intelligent, very well, some professional folks out there. And what they quickly cast the accusation out. And by the way, folks, all of this has happened since, what would you say, Andrew, since last Friday?
Saturday, honestly, I just started picking up on it.
The timeline.
Saturday morning. Yeah, because he won. What happened was he won the.
I'm listening.
Yeah, he didn't win the SPFBO, although his book did really well in it. But he did win the cover contest. And that's when
That's it. That's it. Oh,
everything
okay.
blew up. Yeah.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
announced the winner of the
And that's
cover
when the
contest,
internet
I
sleuth.
think yesterday morning. Yeah.
So we're looking at about a 36-hour time frame, I think, when everything was going on. And this just kind of shows the breakneck speed that the internet can run at. I mean, we had some users on there, and I'm looking at Benjamin BLM. This guy is really, really plugged in the IT world. He was able to go into Midjourney, I
Yeah.
think, and discover some prompts. Now, I've never used Midjourney. I don't understand it. So all these words are kind of abstract to me. And there was another user who's, he has practically earned a PhD in trying to, to look at this controversy. I'm just going to give you, it's Zagu Mizion, and this person has thread after thread about what's going on. And if the folks are interested,
Yeah.
I can post a link to
It's
their
hardcore.
Twitter so you can check it out for yourselves. Oh yeah, for sure. But so eventually, what's happened with this? So let me back up and reframe this. The accusation came out against MV Prindle that the cover art for Bob the Wizard was generated by artificial intelligence. What the program was, nobody was quite sure at first. And then um, MV came out and said that the artist who he had commissioned for the art had assured him that it wasn't AI. And so he was back in as artist. And I believe the artist, the only kind of contact information that was given is that his name was Sean. And there may have been an account associated with Sean, but I haven't been able to find it anywhere. I haven't been able to find any kind of, some examples that Sean has given out, which is not unheard of in the cover design community. I know there's a lot of authors who will commission some work. This person does not have a website, but they're just really, really well known,
Sure.
and they're able to generate art, and commissions, just through the word of mouth. So that's not in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with that. But the accusations were piling up, and then it looks like MV decided to back off a little bit and said, "Hey, you guys are kind of proving to me that this was AI generated." And so I believe this morning he reached out to Sean, the artist, and Sean basically cut all contact with him. And so he willingly withdrew Bob the Wizard, the cover art from the cover art design of SPFBO. And so I just want to say up front, and I think that Andrew is in agreement with me. We don't care if you as a author, a writer, decides to use AI, right? I mean, are we more or less in the same boat on that,
A-
Andrew?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a Midjourney
Yes.
account, and I go in there every once in a while and just play with it because it's really fun. I mean, it is amazing technology. It's cool. And I've gone in and I've like input descriptions of my characters into it to see what they would look like. So, I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm not anti AI at all. I just, if you're going to use it in a professional and commercial context, you've got to disclose that. I mean,
And
it's
there's the
you're
rub.
right. I mean, it's like it
Yeah.
seems pretty basic, right? Yeah,
And there's the rub.
yeah. And
That's
so,
right.
like,
We
with
are already,
this,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, with this, it's like I watched all of this kind of unfold yesterday, as I think you probably did, and there's a really nasty tendency on Twitter to just dogpile people, right? I mean, we've all seen that, and I don't want to do that. I don't know this guy. I don't know the author. I don't know the artist, right? It became apparent to me pretty quickly, in my opinion, reading it, that something untoward was going on. But I'm not going to jump in and just savage people until they at least have a chance to defend themselves. Um, but it just the story just kind of got stranger and stranger, and then I think it eventually collapsed under its own weight. And I don't know if it's the end of it or not. I mean, I hope for the author's sake that it is, and
That
so
was
there's
the
not
thing for me.
more
Yeah.
going on here.
Well,
Um, but it's
as
like
this,
all
yeah.
of this could have been avoided just with the simple disclosure, right?
Hmm.
And the thing that got me, Frank, the very first reaction I had when I started reading about this, and I bet I'm not alone on this. I would imagine a lot of authors who were reading it had the same reaction was, "Oh shit! I hope my cover artist didn't use AI." Right now, they didn't. I know that now. I never really suspected it, but the odd thing to me was there was this immediate and very aggressive denial on the part of the author that I
Okay,
felt
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, how do you know, right? Why are you digging in so deep on this, and how could you possibly know? Um, and I think a lot of people kind of seized on that too. So unfortunately, I think the author didn't do himself any favors in the way that he responded yesterday.
I can certainly agree with that. And as a matter of fact, I sent out a tweet in support of MV because that was just kind of my
Yeah,
immediate knee jerk, my reaction to anything like this whenever I start to see a witch hunt or a dog pile. But what do we do when the
right.
witch hunt are after real witches? I mean, it's like, um, and so I mean, it's like, yeah. I mean, what if there's a real witch and casting spells that's bringing about a plague or something? Is a witch hunt bad then? But my thing about it is like I've seen a
Yeah,
couple of camps that quickly emerged. First of all, you had the people who drew the wagons around the author, MV Prindle. I'm so sorry, guys. I am tired. I'm not getting a lot of sleep these days, but they drew the wagons around him, which is cool. That is totally cool. If
yeah,
anyone started attacking you or any of my prior guests, that's going to be my very first thing, and that's their call. I totally,
sure.
totally, yeah, I respect that 100%. But then you have the other ones who, in the face of the evidence that the cover art was actually designed and generated by Midjourney, dug their heels in and accused everyone around them of being on a witch hunt in the face of actual facts. And and the fact that they seemed to not be bothered that a lie had been told somewhere. Either the artist lied to MV, either MV lied to other people to cover for the artist, maybe MV was lied to himself, but there was a lie that was told where, and they don't seem bothered by that. They seem bothered by everyone being upset over Midjourney. And that right there is where the worry is. I mean, if you want to use Midjourney, that's cool, but I think a disclosure that you're using it, and most of the folks do. I mean, they'll show you on their feeds their Midjourney prompts, their pictures and
Yeah,
all. And I mean, I've seen some cool stuff on there. But a lie was told, and people are still defending that and accusing everyone around them of being, on this witch hunt. Which I kind of wonder. Then I'm like,
right.
okay, are you using a bunch of artificial intelligence then and not telling anyone? But this is the uncertainty that you and me, Andrew, were talking about in the interview. I mean, there's just all this like gray smoke now that has come up because of AI, and it seems like it's just dragging a bunch of lies along with it into our lives.
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking, I think, or messaging back and forth about this before the interview. That yeah, I mean, like most things, it ultimately it's not about the AI, it's about the people, right? And it's not about necessarily AI capabilities, impressive or scary as they may be. It's about human values and integrity, honesty, transparency. These things really do matter. Like I said, I mean, I have no desire to dogpile anybody in this, but I think you have to understand and on some level respect the reaction of the community to it, right? I mean, this is a scary time. It's a time of very rapid change. You have this pseudo right product, that came out not long ago that now purports to be able to help an author write a novel in like a weekend. I think is what I've heard. And you have some authors out there
Yeah,
defending it,
yeah,
including some authors who are very well known and authors who I respect. SB Divya, who's been nominated for a Nebula and a Hugo Award, was out there, promoting this product, and then basically stopped responding and deleted her Twitter. Um, so
That was a creepy
you know,
thing. That was a
it's a
creepy
very
thing.
delicate time.
Like, oh yeah, and that author who you just referenced, it brings up a really an interesting dynamic to all of this. Is the financial interest that a lot of the people who are pushing artificial intelligence on the writing community actually have with these
Right.
developers. I mean, they're sitting and like, how did these writers get these paid speaking gigs to be on boards where they talk about AI and giving everyone advice? It's like almost overnight, this circuit on how to AI for writers developed like that. And these writers who, when I was kind of digging into their history, never gave a public speech at all, are all of a sudden a paid public spokesperson. And then they're pushing an app, they're pushing a developer. And then I find out that a lot of them, um, who I really respected, are just, calling Luddites. They say that, you're just scared of change and progress and all this. And it's like, look, dude, you haven't addressed any of our concerns about this technology. And I'm not going to name names because a lot of them I talk to, and I'm in the process of expressing what I feel to them on a private and individual basis. But there's some
Hmm.
financial ties with a lot of the writers who are pushing this, and you know,
No, no doubt.
I
Right. I
I don't
mean, and
know,
that's,
Andrew. I mean, it's just really really weird. Yeah,
it is weird.
what's that,
And
man? Mhm.
it's weird, and yet, and it's also completely unsurprising. Right. I mean, like, of course, if you're a developer and you want to get this tool out there to writers, who are you going to go to promote it? Writers.
Exactly. Yeah,
People are persuaded very easily by money. you know, like, it's fine to
especially a
have,
struggling
sort of
writer.
an
Yeah,
ethical orientation. Right. Like, yeah. I mean, like, and it's not like these writers are out there making, most of them, millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even enough to like pay rent and buy food, right? Like, with their writing, almost all of us have day jobs. So, somebody comes along and they're offering, some kind of compensation for something like this. I mean, I get it. I understand why somebody would be open to that. Um, but it like it is a really important conversation that the artistic and creator community has to have right now. Right now,
that's true.
like, if we
Yeah,
wait a year, it's going to be too late.
but I mean,
And
it's like
so,
who
again,
who are the
don't want to dogpile,
champions?
but I
Yeah.
also understand the people who do dogpile. You know,
Well, I mean, a lot of the detractors of what happened to Envy, to the writer that we're talking about, they kept throwing the term around of a witch hunt and mob justice and all this. Well, let's look at the dynamics
yeah,
of a witch hunt. Let's look at the dynamics of mob justice. There's an idea that there's no central authority. There's no higher power in a hierarchy that we can appeal to, and there's some superstition. Hey, the AI is going to come and take all of our writing jobs. Now, we can argue that that's more than a superstition. That could be an existential threat. I don't think that, and I have some hard reasons for thinking that. But for a lot of folks, their fear is their superstition. So, I mean, it's a legit witch hunt, and
yeah,
this is something that needs to be addressed. And instead, what we get from the established authors is gaslighting. And when I say established authors, if you are a famous indie author that's been kind of weighing in on this and accusing everyone of being on a witch hunt, you're just gaslighting everybody their legitimate concerns on this. And I'm not going to name names on them. I mean, I'm not trying to make this a mudslinging thing, but
no,
it's like, who are the champions in the writing community that's really starting to take up their concerns, which the artists have raised ever since Midjourney came out. So I would like to give a shout out to the indie artists out there, the digital design folks. You
yeah,
guys were kind of the frogs in the ecosystem that were kind of warning us about what was coming. And I don't think
yeah,
anyone ever took
yeah.
took you really seriously on that. So
You know, I can't remember if you were in this discussion on Twitter or not, but there was an interesting kind of, I don't know, half day back and forth that I had with somebody recently who was directly comparing, what's going on to the Luddite movement. And
Oh
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
actual
I think I
historical
saw that.
Luddite
Yeah.
movement, not like the mythology of the Luddite, right? And like, you know, like my the way that I like entered that conversation was, cough cough. By the way, the Luddites were right, and I believe that. Now,
Oh yeah, yeah.
what Luddite has come to mean in the popular imagination is something very different than it actually was as a historical movement. In the popular imagination, it just stands for, standing athwart history, crying stop.
Hmm.
We will not accept any technology. We're going to smash your machines. We're going to, build a Butlerian jihad, to pull out a nerdy Dune reference on it.
Love
Um,
the. That's right.
that's not what
Love
it
it.
was
All
about.
right.
That's not what it was
Yeah.
about. It was about people and jobs and families, and it was, generations of weavers who were being completely disrupted, upended, losing their income, losing their homes, unable to put food on the table of their families because of this influx of capital around automation. Okay, and I'm not a super political guy. I think you get that. Like, I'm not like anti-capitalist or, whatever. I've got a critique of it. Like, we're born with a critique of capitalism these days. But
Oh
like,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's not where I'm coming from on it. But
Yeah, yeah.
there's the historical Luddite movement. The things that they said were going to happen happened. The people did lose their jobs. They did lose their homes. People did, starve. There was an incredible amount of disruption and suffering that came out of that. And
And it was
it just seems
unnecessary
like we're kind
too.
of doomed to repeat that cycle.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And the suffering that happened in
So, you know,
the industrial revolution, it didn't have to happen. It wasn't a deterministic force in history. I mean, it could have been managed for sure.
that's right. And
Mhm.
it's just we're in this interesting phase, I think, in Western civilization, maybe human civilization as a whole, where capital organized into corporations is seemingly a pretty unstoppable force, right? Like,
Mhm.
people can organize. We have a right to organize. We have a right to, to decide that certain technologies and certain, business processes are really damaging to the common good and we don't want them. But inevitably, what seems to happen is capital comes in strong, um, and organizes around a corporation. Wealth is concentrated and created, and the end result is that people lose, and the automation process wins. And so it's created, because we're in this phase, which I don't think will last forever, because nothing lasts forever. But because of
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
it
Mhm.
has created this myth of inevitability. Like, oh, you're a Luddite. You're fighting technology. You can't ever win. Will you people never learn? Okay, well, we have 250 years of history, on that so far.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't mean it's going to be like this forever.
Exactly, yeah. And as Frank Herbert said in Dune, never count a human being dead till you see the body. And I think that there is something about the human spirit that is uncontainable. And ultimately, it's chaotic in a way that I think will kind of defy the mechanization. But I kind of wonder sometimes if artificial intelligence is the automative and capitalist response to it. Hey, because it seems like out of automation came political movements to separate a human being from his past, from his family, from the soil that he tills and try to create this new man. Well, that was an abysmal failure. The closest automation got, I think, was nationalism, which, of course, as you know, it broke up the Austro Hungarian Empire, it broke up the Ottoman Empire, and it is still a force to be reckoned with today. But it seems like AI
Very
is
much so.
kind of the antidote. Oh, yeah. And it seems like today, though, with the failure of automation to separate us from our human spirit, it's this creepy invention that has come about to render a human being irrelevant now. If they can perpetuate the process of creative chaos that's inside of every human being, if those series of zeros and ones can actually do that, then they will have fulfilled, the prophecy of industrialization. Instead of having a new man, well, we can have an economy with no man. Instead of worrying about breaking, ourselves free from the constraints of history and setting us on like a golden path, like Leto the Second did in God Emperor of Dune, another Dune reference. Well, we can just create these machines,
Mhm.
and we will have our own history starting with year zero. And that's kind of like something that I see attempting. Now, I don't think that it's going to happen. I think that, as we talked about last time, the creative genus in us is something that can't be measured. But for the disruption, starvations, folks losing their jobs, I mean, and already on Twitter, I mean, we are getting a foretaste of things to come. The SPFBO, the controversy that has come out, it seems like the lie was amplified by the AI, is what it was, in a sense that you had a human being with deceit in his heart, and you had an act of, um, I guess it's like an ape of creation in Midjourney. The computer is realizing something that's in your head. And I don't know, Andrew. I mean, it just seems like we're on a really, really weird, this trajectory that we're headed down.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost hard to, it's almost hard to even, it's almost hard to have like good, like productive conversations about it, isn't it? I
I
mean,
know.
you
Yeah,
can
yeah, it
observe, like,
is.
we're in this moment where you
Everybody
can
is so
observe what's happening.
tribal.
You can kind of like, right? You can point out like, oh my God, look at that. That's dangerous. That's a risk. And other people will say, no, but what about this? And it's going to allow us to do X, Y, and Z. But it's one of those moments where like, time is kind of compressed around us in a bubble, and it's very, very hard to see very, very far into the future. Um, with this, I mean, I think there's a general and appropriate sense that it's risky, that it's dangerous. Um, and things like what happened with the SPFBO, um, will continue to happen, and other communities will be affected. And we said it earlier. We said the visual artist tried to warn us, and they were right, and we didn't necessarily pay attention. Well, in 6 months, somebody's going to say, "Oh my God, those indie writers were right. I can't believe how bad this is." But it's the scariest thing about it is just the not knowing where it's going.
Not only that, but to kind of
At
add
least to me.
another layer of uncertainty over all of this. Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I shared that very same, thought as well. But it's the fact that our conversation that we're having right now could become irrelevant with version 5. And then how relevant is a
Mhm.
conversation about a disclosure of AI use going to be when version 6 comes out, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? I mean, is there going to come a point
Right.
where you cannot create, well, where the format, and again, this kind of goes back to Neil Postman and his theory that form is informed by context or by the content. No, content is informed by form. So the form of the content
Is that
could be
is that
AI,
also kind
period,
of?
in
I
the
mean, is he
story.
kind of in the Marshall McLuhan school of thought on that too?
I think he is. Yes, yes, he is. Well,
Okay,
hold up a second.
because
I
I'm not
don't want to
familiar
get
with Postman.
checked
I'm
by
familiar with
anyone
McLuhan.
who is a Neil. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, so Neil Postman was, let's see, I'm trying to think how to put this on. In his book Amusing Ourselves to Death, he was mainly addressing radio and TV in like the 60s and 70s, I believe,
Oh, right,
and about how
right,
radio and
right.
TV was shortening everyone's attention spans. Yeah, and his central thesis was,
Ah,
hey, it's not that a human being has an ingrained attention span of 3 minutes. It's just that you provide content where the form is 3 minutes long. And
right,
so you've actually shaped
right.
the brain to be a certain way.
Sure.
And so our conversations, I mean, we're talking about honesty, integrity, as it regards AI. Is AI going to shape, or sorry, is the use of AI going to shape the landscape so that these terms are going to become harder and harder to apply? Where there's no way to verify
Oh boy,
if
that's
someone
really
is using it.
terrifying.
There's just, I mean, yeah, I know. I mean, it's just because, I mean, we can, because
It's really
here's
terrifying. So
what I'm
McLuhan,
afraid of. Yeah, yeah, listening to you. Yeah, go on.
yeah, I mean McLuhan, and I don't want to
What's that,
interrupt your
Andrew?
thought.
Yeah.
thought flow either. So like,
Oh no
um,
no 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 no. Oh no.
McLuhan's,
This is fine. Yeah.
core message was, um, the message is the medium, right? That's kind of his, like, what people know. If
Yeah
they know
yeah
anything
yeah.
about McLuhan, they know that expression,
Hmm.
right? And he also was the person who, I think back in the 50s, I'm going to say, predicted the emergence of what he called the global village. Like, and for him, he's kind of traced the evolution of society and human relations, human thought, um, through these various technical developments, starting with like the printing press, which allowed, not just allowed, but almost demanded this interiority, this sort of like private retreat into the self while you consume this content for the first time. Literacy was a requirement of it, right? So, I mean, it had all kinds of ancillary effects, but, um, to where we are today, where you literally you go to a room that's filled with every other person in the world shouting. You know what I mean? And like, you can instantly, your message can be amplified, and you can have 10 million people paying attention to or repeating or amplifying what you're saying. You could also have 10 million people calling you an asshole, um,
Exactly. Yeah.
instantly. And that's, I mean, like, that is, that is where we are. Um, but I think I interrupted you.
Well, no. That actually is gonna piggyback off of what I was saying, and which yeah. I mean, we are living in a world with the inner. I mean, it's an interconnected mind, is what it is. And you had a very interesting concept in Our Lady of the Artilects. As you were speaking, it kind of reminded me of it. Can you pronounce it? It's like ERGOR, what, GE? It's an egorg, or I am so sorry about that. I have the
Egregores.
author in front of me, and I can
Yeah, no.
egregores.
Egregores. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's,
Okay, okay, all right, yeah. It seems
interesting
like there's
concept.
a
It's kind of an occult.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of an occult concept, right? I mean, at least maybe it's been co-opted by 20th century occult thinkers. I don't know, but it's this idea of a group mind that has, um, a life of its own, that like shapes human minds, that fights to expand and live and propagate. um, and what I thought was interesting is, there are, as you know, I mean, I'm a Roman Catholic, and that's, the core of my worldview. But what I found interesting is there are a lot of, saints, and I mean, I think even doctors of the church who, took this concept very, very seriously, to say the least. You know, the idea that like minds can merge, and we also talked a little bit about like Donald Hoffman, who's the neuroscientist out at UC Davis, who's doing research into, the fundamental nature of reality. And his theory is it's consciousness, and specifically it's conscious agents. And he's got a, kind of this beautiful mathematical system based on, you know amplituhedrons, sort of shapes that have multiple dimensions that we can't perceive, and they're generated out of like, decorated
That is so
permutations that are
wow,
governed by
wow.
Markovian
Yeah,
dynamics. I
yeah.
say all that stuff. I'm saying all this stuff like I understand it, but I don't. Let me just really assure you of that. Okay.
That's some
But,
HP
um,
Lovecraft level stuff there. I love that.
oh, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But what he's, I mean, at the core of what he's saying is that, um, the base level of reality that he thinks we can get to within a foreseeable future is, um, reality being made up of conscious agents that can combine. Okay, I can see the classic example would be, um, here's a conscious agent that can only see yellow. That's it. It's a bit of information. Yellow, not yellow. Here's one that can see blue. Blue, not blue. That's it. They come together, and because they're now together, they can perceive green. That is a third conscious agent. You have the two constituent parts, and then you have the
I see
sum of
what you're saying.
of the
Yeah,
whole,
yeah.
and it can kind of build from there. And I mean, you can get into mysticism pretty quick from that, right? Like, what is God? God is the sum total of all conscious agents in the universe. I don't believe that, but it's an interesting line of thought. But and to me, it is, yeah, it's related to the concept of egregores, because if Hoffman's right, and the universe is made up of conscious agents that seek each other out, fight each other, or combine with each other, um, then that concept might actually point to a reality.
Definitely, for sure. And, you know, on the concept of an egregore, it's like I sense that there's something happening on Twitter with this AI thing. I mean, it seems like whenever Midjourney came along, there was something, I don't know, there was something, it had this eerie quality where folks who always kind of harvested an artistic bent, but they may have lacked the discipline. They may have lacked the
Yeah,
opportunity, even, through no fault
I'm
of
one of
their
them.
own, to really kind of go to yeah, to go to school. And all of a sudden, my feed is full of like all these images, but they all kind of had like the same kind of quality. It's like this. And I mean, I
Yeah,
like a cartoon. I mean,
yeah.
I watch them, but there's this cartoonish, surrealist, and I don't know if I'm using those terms right. I definitely don't want someone who actually knows art to come in and school me. Well, I would actually. If you know art and I'm using the terms right, you are welcome to come on here. But they have this kind of interpretive weirdness to them. It's almost like if we're
Hmm.
talking to an alien in their spaceship and we're telling them about us, and so they produce this really dreamy dreamscape kind of stuff, and like where like what the art will zoom in on, is very, very different. I guess it's very strange. Uh it's almost iconographic in a way, like the art itself is trying to tell us a
It's a
story
good
that
point.
the originator, yeah, that it didn't have. And like where you're in the picture too, like there's not like a central point, I guess, in the art that I've seen Midjourney do that would draw the eye into like a central place. It's almost like you're just looking out of a window. I mean, I don't know. It just has this eerie kind of
Huh.
quality to it.
Yeah, it does. I agree. I mean, it can be really cool and fun, but then yeah, it like you look at enough of it and you're like, what's going on in there?
Well, well, it's an uncanny valley thing. I mean, it's definitely an uncanny valley.
Yeah.
But with that said, though, I think we're about 40 minutes in, and I want to save up the good stuff for the interview with you, Andrew, that we're going to be having when I review your book. But just to kind of close out, I guess I'll kind of I'll give a closing out, and then I'll ask you for some final thoughts on this. But nothing against the author, nothing against Bob the Wizard, but it seems like there's a lie that was going on, and nobody has really come forward to to accept blame for the lie yet. So I think that if the author wants to really put this behind him, then which it looks like he's done. I mean he's come forward and said that he had nothing to do with it. And so I understand that there's some questions about that. There's a track record, but I will take him at his word because I don't really know him, and I know some really good names that are backing him up. But it seems like when you combine a lie with art and artificial intelligence, we get a bunch of confusion. And I think what authors need to start doing is disclosing the use of artificial intelligence. And I would really like to see a change in Amazon where you can have, hey, the story was generated by AI, but then again, you're going to run into like a real, a swampy area where, it's not exactly a lake and it's not exactly a creek. I mean, does AI count if you use cover art? What if your artist is using a background image that's generated by AI, but your character is something that she drew by hand? Does that count? What if your idea for your novel came from a line that GPT-4 or whatever told you? What if the engines to your spaceship operate on principles that the AI, that it invented for you, so you didn't have to do the research, but you wrote everything else? I mean, we are reaching a point, Andrew, and for the listeners, where I think that the incentive to use AI is going to be so great that most writers are just going to start doing it. And they're going to start doing it secretly without telling everyone. And um, I don't know. I just kind of think that that's where things are going. Um, those are my thoughts. That's all I have for what it's worth.
That would be,
What do you have, sir?
yeah. I mean, look, I don't know that I disagree with anything that you said. Um, I think to me, I have no interest in being punitive about this, no interest in calling people out, no interest in dogpiling, no interest in, you know, uh, you know, smashing the machine. I like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't find that very interesting or productive. I'm interested in a few things that relate to this. I'm interested in the human values of transparency, integrity, honor, truthfulness. Okay, and making sure that those values don't get transvalued in this shift that we're undergoing, in sort of like the culture, the creative process, whatever you want to call it, right? Because you alluded to this earlier. Like, are we going to get to a point where like transparency and truthfulness and integrity don't even matter? Well, I hope not. I hope not. But I mean, you know, Nietzsche said we would. You know what I'm saying? And like, here we have now technology that is enabling Superman in some ways, the Ubermensch. Um, I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in like, what is creation? What is beauty? What is truth? Um, are they computational? Are they algorithmic? Are they related to like deep brain structures that enjoy symmetry because they themselves are symmetrical? Or is there something more to us than that? I know what I believe. I'm not here to preach. That's not what this is about. Don't want to. Can't persuade anybody of anything anyway anymore. But those are the things that I'm interested in. And I think the AI discussion is very much at the heart of all of that stuff. You know, um, somebody's going to write a great novel with AI one of these days. They are. Probably sooner than we think. And then it's going to get really interesting because then we're going to have a discussion about like what what is a great novel? Why? Why did we respond to this? Where did it come from? But
And not
so soon, AI and ChatGPT will get to the point where I bet you could take the first 5 Dune novels by Frank Herbert, which in my opinion are just, I mean, they're classics that transcend genre and time. They're so freaking good. They're so unique. That voice is so powerful, right? Feed them into ChatGPT and say, finish this series. And I bet you it would produce a better result than what Frank Herbert's own son was able to do with Kevin Anderson, right? So what are we going to do then?
and not only that, but the computer, the machine, the AI could probably understand Frank Herbert better than Brian,
Oh,
better than Frank Herbert's son. And this is no slight against Dan, but it could pull from public record, it could pull from his readings, his recordings, his voice. And here's something else. What if the machine said, "Hey, what if we do 70% Frank Herbert, 20% Isaac Asimov. This will give us the conclusion to the
oh my
series
gosh.
that will for the yeah. I mean, what's
Wow.
to stop it from mixing and matching? And here's something else.
So see,
Do you think that
this is the
but
terrifying thing.
oh yeah, let me finish it out too. And
I want
here's
to
where
read
the
that.
yeah, I know. I mean, I would too, but here's the scary part. And we were talking about where capital meets a corporation. Do the publishing houses in those contracts the writers sign imagine what they have rights to do that? I mean,
Hmm.
they probably right now can say, "Hey, we can create a 40% Stephen King, 10% Dean Koontz, 8% Anne Rice, and whatever your political affiliation, far left, far right, we'll get those writers and we
Hmm.
can work it in there so you have a theme in there as well that will align perfectly with your worldview." Boom.
Yep. Well, I mean, look, how many novels does James Patterson put out per year?
Oh yeah.
More novels than a human
Yeah.
being named James Patterson could write,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and he's open about
Yeah.
this. I mean, again, I mean, I'm not busting on people like, you know what I'm saying, but like, he's got a company and he has ghostwriters, and then he brings in celebrity names. Like I think he just did one with Dolly Parton, and my mother-in-law read it and was like, "Oh my God,
Wait,
this is
what?
amazing! This is the best book I've ever read." And I'm like, thanks, mom." You know, um, but I mean, what's to stop the next version of James Patterson Inc. from being able to turn out like 500 of those, 1,000 of those, 10,000 of those books a year.
10,000. I was just about
You
to
know,
say,
so
yeah,
many
for
that like
sure.
if you want to stay in that universe and you just freaking love that voice, and those are the stories that that like sing to your soul on some level, or fill a gap, fill some need in you. You don't ever have to venture outside of it.
You know, kind of circling back to Frank Herbert's book in Dune and the references that he made to, the machines. Sorry about that. And the rise of the machines in Old Terra, especially as you get into Heretics and Chapter House when they really heavily referenced it. But there was this idea that human beings had gotten too cozy in their life to where like every single need was perfectly fulfilled, and to where they had just stopped evolving as a species. And it wasn't that
Yeah.
I understand that that Brian Herbert kind of had like where human beings were enslaved in huge masses to the machines, and they violently overthrew the
Hmm.
machines. But the impression that I got from Frank Herbert was that humanity was down to the wire as far as our ability to reproduce, and we may have been reproduced, artificially. For example, the great mystery, the sandworm of Dune, Shai Halud, it wasn't native to Dune. In fact, the environment of Arrakis was artificial, and so it's like it just kind of opened up this possibility when I was thinking about AI and never being forced to leave your worldview, always staying in the worldview that you grew up with. I mean, I'm so glad that, and I
Yeah.
mean, I like Stephen King, I like Anne Rice, but I'm so glad that I never stopped with them. I'm so glad that, I discovered other authors out there, that I've discovered Stephen William Hanna. I think he's a great dude. I love his books. I'm so glad I discovered your book, even.
I love Steven.
And even, I'm sorry, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's like, yeah, yeah. I mean, a machine that may not even release the book for like wide consumption, just tailor it for you. Hey, just scan your ID code. I will read your psychological printout. Boom, here. I mean, are we going to get to that point? But I don't know. I don't know. But these conversations are worth having
Yeah,
because, yeah,
they are.
because in the end, that's all that
And
we
why
can
do we
really
read?
do is have a conversation. Yeah. Why? Yeah. Yeah. Why
And
do we
why do we
read?
read?
Yeah.
That's another
Hmm.
thing that this gets to really quickly. It's like, I mean, and people read for different reasons. This can't be boiled down to a simple answer, right? I mean, it's way more complicated than that. Some people read just for entertainment. Some people read to be inspired. Some people read to learn, all these things. But, we're going to get to the point where like I love books that change the way I think, that somehow get into this and penetrate the dense layer of bullshit that I've got built around it, and actually change the way that I think about things, right? And then what ends up happening, and Dune's the classic example of that. Like, what ends up happening is, what happens? I go through life and I see Dune everywhere. I
Yes, you're
see
right about,
Frank
yeah,
Herbert's
yeah.
idea set hovering over this topic that we have right now. This rising threat of AI, or frankly, even in like some of the discussion around climate change. I mean, Herbert was way ahead of his time on that stuff. Um, I wonder if we're going
We
to get to a
already have
point
the
where
honored matriz too.
self,
Yeah.
you, you could self-select, this idea set even that you want to live with. And when you go through your life, it says, there it is. There it is. Oh, look, there's that book you love. Oh yeah, that's that author. Remember that idea that stuck with you, that changed something in the way that you think. There it is again. Just mirrored back at you forever. That's a little bit scary. That's a little dystopian, I think.
So, and speaking of dystopian, this is a great a segue to our conversations. Have you ever read 1984?
I have. Yeah, it's been a
Okay.
while. It's been a
Sorry
while, but
about that.
I
So,
but I have read it.
yeah. So jump on board really quick because I'm about to combine an idea I just had with something that I read in 1984. So when Winston, the main character, had met up with O'Brien. So Winston is a low ranking party dude. O'Brien is a member of the inner party. Supposedly, he has access to all of the secrets of the totalitarian Oceania, I think is what it was called. But
Hmm.
there was a book that was floating around that was written. I cannot remember his name, but he was the kind of like the arch villain of Oceania that the propaganda had built up to be the boogeyman, kind of like their version of Hitler or Osama bin Laden or something like that.
Right.
And he had written a book about the practice, kind of like what was really going on with Oceania when Winston was being tortured by O'Brien in the end, and he says, "Look, who really wrote this book?" And I cannot remember the character's name that was the boogeyman in Oceania, but he said,
I
"Did he
can't.
really write this book?" And O'Brien kind of like just, which one thing with O'Brien in 1984 is he continually just dismissed the idea that there was like this objective reality. And he basically said everyone wrote the book. And he goes, "I don't know if that person was real or not. It doesn't matter." And he goes, "Because they're real in the book." And so what I just thought is like, hey, if we go on 20 years from now and my grandchildren want to read Dune, do I really know if that's the original Dune or not? At this point, I mean, I have a copy over here of Dune. Maybe I could dig it up and be like, hold
Sure.
on a second, kids. I've got the original, but I mean, the ability of artificial intelligence to alter books that we've already read, especially whenever they come into the public domain. What if the only copy of Dune that
Oh boy.
sells is yeah, is if Paul Atreides has children with the Princess Aurelian? What if that's the only one that does? And it completely throws the whole concept of the Kwisatz Haderach. It throws off the concept of the god. I mean, it just changes everything. I mean, it's like we're going to reach a point where there's going to be so much of this bullshit. I mean, I don't know, man. It is uncanny. It's the uncanny valley of perception. I always thought there would be an uncanny valley of machines, but there's like this epistemological uncanny valley that we're in now. It's really, really weird. It's really, really strange.
It is. Yeah, it is. You know, you made me think of who was it recently? It was Roald Dahl. All of his publisher, I think, went back and like expurgated all of his books, like
Oh,
removed,
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
references that were deemed offensive or sort of untimely, whatever it was. And by that I mean, like, I don't even know if I've ever read a Roald Dahl book. Like, it's just not my thing. But
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
it's like, and there are people saying, "Hey, great, that's absolutely what they should do. Now we can read it and really enjoy it." And then there are others that are saying, "Well, how dare you change it? This is, some form of cancel culture, what have you, or whatever." I don't know. I mean, what is a book? Is it an artifact in time, or is it supposed to be something more than that? I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say it's an artifact of time, and it should be left in its time. But that's my opinion.
Same here. Yeah. And I mean, there's folks that want to treat a book like the Constitution like it's a living document, to be updated. But to me, a good book that's outside of our own time zone, it accuses and it exculpates you, is what it does. It accuses
Hmm.
you where your society has forgotten about certain morals that really, really matter. And at the same time, it lets you off the hook because you can look at it and see flaws in its own moral structure from where you're standing. And there, folks, we're going to leave it off. I hope you enjoyed this conversation between myself and Andrew Gillsmith. Again, I would like to let you know that he is the author of Our Lady of the Artilects. And let me tell you what, this is a novel you need to get. 100% written by a human being and not an AI. If he's even real, I've only seen him through my MacBook here. So that's it. Andrew, Andrew, I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Frank.